All right, now that we're back all together, let me introduce our next speaker. We are truly honored and privileged to have with us the chairman of the United States Sentencing Commission, the Honorable Carlton Reeves, who in his other day job serves as a U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of Mississippi, where he has served for 13 years. Before that, Judge Reeves served as a staff attorney for the Supreme Court of Mississippi, a federal prosecutor, and a partner at the law firm of Pickett, Reeves, Johnson, and Minor. He's also a trailblazer. Judge Reeves was in the first class of students to attend integrated public schools in Mississippi, the first person in his family to attend a four-year college, and the second African American ever to be appointed as a federal judge in the state of Mississippi. And he is at the helm of a very busy and active sentencing commission, adopting and considering a whole host of reforms to the sentencing guidelines, reforms designed to make the guidelines fairer and more effective and more just. I've had the privilege of seeing Chairman Reeves in action, presiding over commission public hearings, something that he does with a special combination of enthusiasm and transparency and intelligence and good humor, even-handedness, and warmth. He's a leader who genuinely wants to hear what people have to say about the work of the commission. The criminal justice system, yes, criminal justice system, indeed the country is fortunate to have him in this very important position at this very pivotal time. So with that, I give you Chairman Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Vinegrad. Looking at my watch, it's still morning, but it's afternoon here. Good afternoon. I want to thank the leadership and the staff of the Center for Justice and Human Dignity for organizing this event and for inviting me to speak. I want to, when Mr. Vinegrad mentioned that I was a former federal prosecutor, I know we think prosecutor, boy, he put people in jail. No, I was chief of the civil division. So let's get that straight right now, okay? Look at you, see that? No. Chief of the civil division, take people money. Defend government action. I want to thank Hannah Lieben Dershowitz, who has done so much to make this conference happen. And I thank my friend Jeremy Fogel, who introduced me to Rabbi Boyarsky and others at the amazing Olive Institute. Fogel is a friend of mine who has done such an extraordinary job improving our judicial decision-making while leading the Federal Judicial Center. That's where I first came in contact with them. And I want to thank Alan Vinegrad, a leading voice for second chances, whose powerful testimony earlier this year pushed the Sentencing Commission to not cast aside the incarcerated. I know there are others in this room because I felt the warmth, and I saw many friends who have not seen in some time, and I heard and I see who's on the agenda and who spoke yesterday and who's slated to speak today. I thank Nancy Gertner, who for years has been a voice in the wilderness, a voice we have needed, calling on us to go back to the drawing board even, to revise what she has long called a deeply flawed guideline system. I'm also honored to be at a conference filled with, again, so many esteemed speakers. There are my colleagues who you heard from earlier today, Judge Phil Restrepo, John Gleason, who some of you heard yesterday, I believe. Vice Chair Laura may or may not be in the room, but but we all have been keeping up with the work that you do. It is such a privilege also to work alongside these giants, I believe. That's what I call them, whose fight for criminal justice reform have laid the groundwork for what we are now doing at the commission. John Gleason, you know, has been toiling out there for decades, as has Judge Restrepo, Laura Mate, and my other colleagues on the commission. I had the pleasure of shaking the hand of Judge Mark Bennett earlier this morning. He is a visionary advocate for changing what he describes as a slow-motion lynching of our sentencing system. His boldness has inspired me and so many other judges, calling on us to break our addiction to incarceration by bending the arc toward greater justice. I ask all of you to read his article and the many others' articles in this remarkable sentencing reform issue of the University of Missouri, Kansas City Law Review from 2018, a collection of wise pieces there. I see my good friend Esther Salas over there smiling. This is a judge who has a heart of gold, the judge who always remembers where she came from, the judge who has been tasked with a mission, and she has embraced that mission to lead, to fight, to persevere, to do justice no matter what the odds, no matter the obstacles. And she and I have crossed paths many, many times at various conferences, and not once have I not seen that beautiful smile. And I have to tip my hat to my colleague here, Bernice Dahm, my homegirl. A trailblazer for justice, the advocate for inclusion, the champion of diversity. So many of us would not be in this room or on the federal bench without her leadership, peeling back the veneer and telling people that our justice system is much better when all of us are part of the justice system. There are too many others here to acknowledge and to thank, but I do, again, want to tip my hat to Keto Best. He's a hero of diversity and reform in our federal probation system. Dean Dana Bowen Matthew, who's the dean of this law school here, I travel in her footsteps back at UVA. She was a couple of years ahead of me. And I know Professor Doug Berman is supposed to speak or has already spoken. His commentary and scholarship keeps pushing the commission towards progress. Again, there are so many others here, and I was so glad. I saw my good friend Frank Montalvo and others. There's so many people here who I want to thank, but they only gave me a few minutes that I know I'm going to go over anyway, but we'll see about that. I'm excited to speak about where the Sentencing Commission might go in the future. More importantly, I want to discuss how we can get to that future. But before doing that, I must talk about where we are now and how we got from here to there. In our country's earliest days, imprisonment was not an ordinary form of punishment. People convicted of crimes were fined. They were whipped, and in many cases, they were executed. What they were not was incarcerated. I say this to point out that imprisonment was the first alternative punishment in our country's history. Some reformers held out incarceration as a more humane sanction that could also better deter crime. If we were to hold this type of conference like this one back in the 1700s, the alternative we would be discussing, we would be promoting, would actually be imprisonment. While incarceration was originally an alternative, criminal sanction, it rose to prominence as an alternative to something else, slavery. Before emancipation, black people who escaped enslavement were disproportionately and frequently incarcerated. After emancipation, black people found themselves subject to what historian Elizabeth Hinton calls the first mass incarceration, a system of criminalization, imprisonment, and convict leasing that amounted to nothing more than slavery by another name. I want to mention that carve-out in the 13th Amendment, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Convicted in my Mississippi by a jury composed of all white men, in cases brought by all white male prosecutors, and in cases presided over by all white male judges. Slavery by another name. Think of my Mississippi, where Parchman's transformation from plantation to penitentiary and its worse than slavery conditions serve as testimony to the terrible genesis of our modern prison system. A few statistics show how dramatic the shift from early mass incarceration to modern mass incarceration has been. 100 years ago, data suggests that as much as 80% of federally convicted people may have received non-prison sentences. Today, that figure has dropped to just 10%. The average American is 10 times more likely to be incarcerated today than they were in the late 1800s. And 1 in 5 black men born in 2001, 20%, can be expected to be incarcerated compared to just 1 in 17 white men, 5.88%. Of course, imprisonment has been transformed from an alternative to slavery and capital punishment into the central fixture of our criminal justice system. We know that transformation has often involved a story of cruel politics, distorted economics, and systemic racism. But at the heart of the tale is the invisibility of imprisonment, the ability to build more prisons in far-flung places, give authorities the most unfettered discretion to send more people to faraway places, and lengthen the terms of incarceration without having to reckon with the true cost of doing so, or truly consider the benefits of any of the alternatives. This invisibility can seem as an inherent part of incarceration. Indeed, the private nature of incarceration was initially one of the widely touted benefits. While the public witnessed the public punishments of the whip, the stockade, and the lynch mob, prison saved many people from having to witness the realities of punishment. But not all have been shielded from the costs of imprisonment. Consider the people sitting right now inside a prison. Consider their children. Consider their families, their friends, and the communities they have been removed from. In a country where millions are currently incarcerated and millions more have been incarcerated, there are many for whom prison's realities have remained painfully visible. And what about the millions more who will be incarcerated? The invisibility of incarceration, then, is not just about the height of the prison walls. It is about the barriers between those who have seen firsthand the cost of imprisonment and those who make decisions about imprisonment. It is about felony and prisoner disenfranchisement, which leave our electorates incomplete and those elected ill-informed. Again, think about my Mississippi, where a minor felony or sometimes even a misdemeanor at the age 18 could banish you from voting from the voting booth for life, where the number of disenfranchised votes is greater than the margin of victory in our last 3 United States Senate races. The invisibility of incarceration is about the legal and social stigma placed on the formerly incarcerated, which not only limits their ability to live in a place of their choice, pursue higher education, and to get a job. That stigma also prevents them from improving society by serving on juries, practicing law, running for office, or even being appointed to public office. Again, think of my Mississippi, the home of historic change makers like Medgar Evers, the state with the highest incarceration rate in the country, where countless potential Fannie Lou Hamers and Vernon Damers have had their stories stifled by a felony conviction. And the invisibility of incarceration is also about the lack of racial and social economic diversity in our courts, prosecutors' offices, and other organs of the criminal justice system, a lack of diversity that strips these bodies of the perspectives which are most likely to fully understand the realities of incarceration. And again, think about my Mississippi, the blackest state in the Union, where just one of 9 state Supreme Court justices is black, where the man nominated a year ago to be just the 4th black federal district judge in our state's entire history, Scott Cologne, who happens to be the first black person to have been elected as a district attorney from a majority white district, still, after having been nominated, still is waiting to receive a confirmation hearing. So when I tell judges, as I often have, that we do not know what it's like to spend a single day in prison, I'm not merely stating a fact. I'm describing a deficiency, a flaw in the system crying out for a cure. When those who decide whether to impose imprisonment on an alternative do not understand the full cost or benefits of either, we are doomed to do injustice. Consider the injustice reflected in the most prominent sentences in recent years. Consider this. Those given to the rioters who attacked Congress on January the 6th, whether for breaking a window at the Capitol building or assaulting a police officer or masterminding the insurrection. These sentences punish different parts of a broad scheme to undermine our elections, to decapitate our government, to overthrow our democracy, to tear up what those guys did in Independence Hall. Despite being imposed for these extraordinary crimes, many January the 6th sentences are below what is recommended by the federal sentencing guidelines. Most sentences, in fact, are below, sometimes far below, the prosecutor's recommendation. And so the January the 6th sentences reflect mercy. And despite penalizing such heinous acts, the January the 6th sentences reflect empathy. A rioter that prosecutors said helped push others toward the violence, used bear spray, and stole equipment from a federal police officer was told by the sentencing judge he was getting a break because of his age. Another rioter who stormed the Capitol building and proclaimed, "We took that bitch over," was told by a sentencing judge, "I don't think this sentence should ruin your life." And despite condemning the most treasonous of plots, the January the 6th sentences often embrace alternatives to incarceration, Both of those rioters I just mentioned received non-prison sentences. So did many others whose punishment for attempting to tear the heart of our democracy was probation, home detention, or fine. These sentences embraced alternatives. They were forged in empathy. They delivered mercy. So how is it that these sentences reveal injustice? Let me show you how. Consider the rioter that prosecutors said engaged in, quote, some of the most barbaric violence, quote, close quote, on January the 6th by forcibly dragging a police officer into a violent mob. He was sentenced to 90 months in prison. That's 2 years below the mandatory minimum for a kid who gets paid a few dollars to run a half a pound of crack across town. Some might say that's outrageous. Consider the rioter who recruited, directed, and encouraged the assault, who helped lead an attack that grievously wounded countless people. He was given a sentence of 18 years in prison. That's many years less than the federal sentences given out to black and brown men who did nothing more and get caught up in a stash house thing concocted and orchestrated by law enforcement officers. That too, some may say, is outrageous. And consider the ink spilled in anger and disbelief over rioters having their lives destroyed by a prison sentence every day in federal district courts across this country. Young people have years of their lives stripped away, not for committing treasonous attacks on our democracy, but for selling, frankly, what some believe are insignificant amounts of drugs or for illegally possessing a firearm. Few, if any, of these sentences cause the headlines of protests in local newspapers. Some would say that's absolutely outrageous. Let me be clear, because I don't want anybody to be walking out and saying that Judge Reeves has criticized his colleagues and stuff for imposing certain sentences. I'm not criticizing the judges who have had to deal with the January 6th cases. Compassion and understanding are the highest of virtues for everyone. They are qualities that judges hope to possess. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that what is outrageous, what is offensive, what might be disgraceful is that our system's restriction of empathy, mercy, and alternative sanctions to the few rather than the many. That should be the outrage. Where are the alternatives for the 15,000 Latinos convicted of federal immigration crimes last year, 97% of whom were sentenced to incarceration? Where was the empathy for the 9,000 people under the age of 25 convicted of federal crimes last year, 10% of whom received sentences of a decade or more in prison? Where was the mercy for the 5,000 black men convicted of federal drug trafficking crimes last year, who were sentenced to over 7 years in prison on average? If you're attending a conference like this one, you have probably asked yourself questions like these many, many times, and you're likely struggling with the same concern that I am. So let me tell you why. Despite all of its flaws, I do have hope that the federal sentencing system can reflect empathy, it can deliver mercy, and it can and should indeed embrace alternative ways of achieving justice. Why I have hope that our passion for change, even if it comes from concern or even outrage, can be channeled into something constructive, something enduring, something that all the people and we, the people, can be proud of. Look at the Sentencing Commission's work over the last year. In a short period of time, we expanded access to extraordinary and compelling release, furthering the First Step Act's goal of increasing opportunities for second chances. We reduce the punitiveness of criminal history scores, ensuring there will be thousands of federal sentences each year. And we've made our new criminal history policies retroactive, giving back as much as 20,000 years of freedom to federally incarcerated people and their families. When I look at this progress, I see the inevitable consequence of appointing commissioners who reflect a true diversity of perspectives, most of whom are women. We're Black, white, Asian, and Latino. Some of us were born into citizenship. One of us actually applied for and earned citizenship. Some of us have served as prosecutors. Others have served as public defenders. One day, perhaps one day, we will be joined by a commissioner who has sat before a federal judge as a defendant, who has paid the cost of incarceration, or maybe one who has reaped the benefits of an alternative sentence. But our progress is not a mere matter of who the commissioners are. No, our policies are a product of the way we have done our work together. They are proof that we're making good on a promise we have made. No matter if you sit in the halls of Congress or at the desk of the prison library, when you speak to the commission, you will be heard. When we solicited public testimony, we heard from DOJ, we heard from victims, we heard from the federal defenders, we heard from practitioners, just as we had in the past. But we also heard for the first time from a group of incarcerated people. When we issued our new guideline amendments, we cited for every amendment the words of incarcerated people and their families. And when we chose to make our criminal history amendments retroactive, we relied on what so many formerly incarcerated people and their families have pointed out to us. The fact that a year in federal prison costs taxpayers $44,000, while a year in supervision costs just $4,000. If that's where we have been and where we are today, then where are we going? Because I recognize that the policies we have enacted do not directly address alternatives to incarceration, and while one of our priorities for this year of policymaking touches on alternatives, there is a deeper question about the issue looming over the commission. When the commission was created, Congress told it that the most fundamental decision of sentencing to be addressed was whether a sentence should be to prison or to an alternative. In making that decision, the original commission chose to write guidelines that made incarceration the default sanction in nearly every case. While the rate of federal non-prison sentences was already dropping by the time the guidelines were implemented, there is no doubt in my mind that the policy choice made 40 years ago is a major reason why alternatives to incarceration today are all but non-existent in the federal system. Will the commission revisit this? What may be the most consequential of its decisions? It is a question that I'm certain many of you want me to answer. I'm not ready to do so, however. Time will tell. But for those who want this commission to begin taking a different approach to incarceration and its alternatives, I have something you will want to hear, I believe. At a time when so much of our government can seem dysfunctional and unresponsive, the Commission is an agency that is open for business. We're committed to fulfilling our mission, inscribed into law by Congress, to ensure federal sentencing practices reflect the advancement in knowledge of human behavior. And we're not just listening to what people have to say, but we are asking everyone to bring their input, their voices, and their energy into our work. This is a unique moment of change, and we need you to help seize it. Help us seize it. And so I ask advocates and members of the public, send the Commission your boldest ideas. Remind us of the need to do all we can do, and hold us accountable to our highest ideals and our most important missions. Scholars and policymakers, send us your research. Ensure we work inclusively and openly. Study every aspect of our work and ensure we engage in evidence-based policymaking. Judges, I see you out there. Lend us your voice. If we're doing something wrong, let us know. But please, my friends, if we're doing something right, it's just as important that you send a comment, a letter, or an email telling us that someone on the bench supports the changes we are making. And incarcerated people and your families, keep fighting to make sure our policies reflect the realities of incarceration and the need for fundamental change. We hear from voices all the time. The Department of Justice has a seat at the table with us. We hear from the defender community. We hear from the practitioners. We hear from the victims. We always do. But I'm so proud that we created a portal this time, a portal that allows the public more of an opportunity, the incarcerated people, to send in their words. We've opened that up. And one other point that I intended to make at the very beginning. I told you we're open for business. We need people like you to apply, to come work with the Commission. As our attorneys, as our researchers, go to www.ussc.gov. See what openings are out there. Please apply. Please come join us. We need your voice. We need your talent. We need your spirit. We need your inspiration. We need you. I'm here making these requests rather than promises for a reason. If the history of mass incarceration teaches us anything, it is that it was no one choice and no one person who got us to where we are. If we want durable, lasting change, it will take more than one person's promises, like mine, and more than 1 year of policy making. It will take all of us. It will take all of you. In the words of Thurgood Marshall, the founding father of the new America, this is your democracy. Make it, protect it, pass it on. You're ready. Let's go to it. Thank you so much. Thank you.